Welcome everyone to our first virtual Friday morning business breakfast talk in our ongoing virtual events series. Nexicom presents Fourth Line Theatre at Home. These sessions will be an excellent opportunity to get to know local business and political leaders and the inner workings of their sectors. I'm so excited to spend some time this morning with Scott McFadden, the Mayor of Cavan Monaghan. But before I do, I just have a few notes. First off, I want to acknowledge our amazing longtime sponsors of Fourth Line Theatre, Nexicom, for their continued support and innovative approach to sponsorship during these unprecedented times. I'd also like to acknowledge Exit Realty LifeLock, our major sponsor. Thank you. Some housekeeping notes. I just want to let you all know that if your audio is your audio is muted. And if you would like to submit a question to Scott or myself, we would be happy to answer your questions during the Q&A session of the talk. To ask a question, simply click on the Q&A button on the menu at the bottom of your Zoom video. You can type it in there. Also be aware that if you mistakenly exit the webinar or have any technical difficulties, you can simply re-enter the webinar by clicking on the Zoom invite link we sent you earlier today via email, and you can get back in the same way you arrived. Be sure to follow our social media, e-blasts, and visit our website to register for our upcoming virtual events. Next Friday, I'll be spending some time with the fabulous Janine Taylor, CEO, publisher, and contributing writer to KorthaNow.com. And then on July 10th, I'll be talking to the wonderful Mayor of Peterborough, Diane Therrien. And then I've got a whole bunch more of these business talks coming up over the rest of the summer. You can also visit Fourth Line Theatre's YouTube channel to view all of our virtual events after the live presentation is over. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the Mayor of Cavan Monaghan, Scott McFadden. Good morning.
Good morning, Kim. How are you this morning?
I'm okay. How are you doing?
Wonderful, wonderful. Another beautiful day.
Absolutely. That's not really where you're sitting behind you, is it?
No, I would love to be able to sit there. I'm indoors so that I don't have any of the distractions around me, but that's actually just off my deck at the backyard. So that is the backyard.
Oh, it is. Oh, it's beautiful. Wow. Well, thanks so much for joining me on my first business breakfast chat. I see you, or from earlier when we came on Zoom, you've got your coffee there already.
Already.
Okay, good. So Scott, I'm just going to start with a bit of history on you. I was so interested to, am I right? You are Millbrook born and raised?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I was myself specifically born in Peterborough. I moved out to Cavan about grade 6, attended South Monaghan Public School, but no, on my mom's side, my ancestors settled in the area. So they actually settled on the Fourth Line.
Did they really?
Yeah. Yeah, the first farm on the Fourth Line was on my grandmother's side, or my grandfather's side of my mom, and on the Larmer line is where my ancestors from my grandmother's side. So they were both descendants of Cavan Monaghan. So that's my roots.
Oh, that's so interesting. And did you go to Crestwood?
I did go to Crestwood, yeah. After I finished South Monaghan, off to Crestwood, yeah.
That's awesome. And so I was looking at your resume, and you went to Queen's and did engineering and computers. Is that right?
Yeah, I attended Queen's University after Crestwood, took electrical engineering, and yeah, there was at the time they didn't have. I'm dating myself, Kim. At the time they didn't have such thing as computer engineering, which was my passion. So I took electrical engineering with what they call the computer option. There was two different sides of electrical engineering. So I took the computer side of electrical engineering.
Were you interested in tinkering with those early computers at home? Like, did you have Commodore 64? Is that what they were? Or?
Oh no, that was way past me. The Commodore 64. I always started to start off with the Commodore, or first off was the Commodore PET with the green screens, and then the VIC-20s with the data cassettes, and then the Commodore 64s, then the 128s. Yeah, that was my time for sure. I loved tinkering away with those.
Well, it's so interesting. When I looked at your resume, I laughed because my husband is a QA manager for a software.
Oh, fantastic. Yes, I spent some time in that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that on your resume. That's so interesting. And so what was the progression from Queen's? I'm curious because when I first met you, you were recently back, I believe, from the United States, sort of New Hampshire. So I didn't know your background. So I didn't know you were a Cavan, long historical Cavan resident. And then, so tell me a bit about the New Hampshire connection. And
sure. So after university, I went off to Ottawa for several years. I worked at the time with Bell Sigma, which then was sold and became part of consulting company CGI. So during my time at Bell Sigma out of university, I worked on the billing system for the Highway 407. So I was in the early days before it launched. So I was part of that bill, that nasty bill that you get from the 407. That was my first endeavor after university. That project wound down as the billing system was deployed, and I did some consulting around Ottawa for probably about a year or two after it had wrapped down. And then from there, I moved down to the States. There was another individual that I worked with on the team in Ottawa that had already previously gone to the States. So he enlightened me on how wonderful of an opportunity it was down in New Hampshire. So I moved down to New Hampshire just after 2000, and that was for about 3-4 years. I was down in New Hampshire. It was a lot of fun.
So you were there during 9/11 in the US.
Yeah, actually, ironically, my oldest son was born 9 days before, so I was actually at home on pat leave just during that time, and when it all happened. So I actually I was at home and we weren't watching television, and my friend from work called me and said, "You got to turn the television on." So I asked what channel. He said it doesn't matter, any channel, and sure enough, turn it on, and there it was. So it was interesting times for sure. The patriotism of Americans at that time was incredible. We did, as everybody else did, is we went as fast as possible to the local grocery store to load up on food and supplies and everything else. And it was a real panic amongst people because we thought this is the beginning of the next World War for sure.
And interesting to think about what you're just talking about, that panic, because we've all just faced it 3 months ago, right? This not World War panic, but end of the world panic, right?
That's right. Yeah, I can honestly say I didn't see the rationing of toilet paper come here because that didn't exist on 9/11. It was more the food that everybody was worried about. So certainly some new lessons that we've learned up here during our pandemic, but a lot of similarities as you indicated. It's that sense of unknown and what's going to happen, and how do you prepare not only yourself but your family to survive.
I'm curious because it is an interesting thing to choose a political path, because mostly people are going to spend a lot of years yelling at you and being angry with you. Where does that come from? That interest in politics? Is it an early interest?
No, it was not an early. I never had any desire to get involved in politics. Ironically, during that time when I returned back from New Hampshire, I had started a family business with my brothers and my mother. And it was a technology-based business. I was responsible for the technology side. My younger brother was involved. He did all the sales, and my youngest brother did the graphics, and my mom did all the invoicing. That being said, I didn't have anything to do with the public or selling or that piece. It wasn't my thing. I'm not at that. I was never that outgoing public person. I never participated in anything at high school, being on the stage at Crestwood. I was never involved in anything political. I was never on councils or anything. So it became, I guess it became a passion later in life when I realized I was sort of tired of complaining and being that person that was complaining, and thought if I want to make a difference, I need to step forward and take control and work to better our community. And that's really where it came from. I've never taken a political science course at high school or in university. And had you told me back in any of my grade school or university that I'd eventually be involved in politics, I would have laughed, because just knowing my personality, I'm not one to. I was never one to speak in public forums and whatnot. So that's a big hurdle to overcome. And so I can appreciate when others stand before me at a council meeting to do a delegation, and I can sense that they're nervous. I get it. I understand that, because I've been there, and I understand that feeling of everything tightens up and it's hard to speak and it's hard to get your points across. And I sympathize with that, because that was me.
Was there a catalyst moment that took you down to the township office to sign the papers to run for councillor the first time?
100%. Yeah. So ironically, when I moved back in 2003 and back to the community, I'd never been to a council meeting. So I'd never been in the old town hall. I'd never been in the new town hall, and I didn't even know such thing as Peterborough County Council even existed. So the catalyst was, if we recall back in 2008, when we were going through the last downturn in the economy, the feds in the province had unleashed a whackload of money for all kinds of various projects. And having been raised in Cavan Monaghan and using the Millbrook Arena, recognizing it was way past its expiry date during my time. And there was always chatter that internally we were going to fundraise and raise funds for a new community center, et cetera, but it had never ever been supported by a council to actually dig in and do it. There was lots of talk about it, but there was never that push from a council to take a leadership role to actually follow through. So initially, when I returned back, my kids started becoming involved in minor hockey, and I got involved in the local minor hockey board. So that was sort of my first venture into not so much politics, but more being on a board. And it was through that I recognized some of the frustrations with the lack of support from the current council at that time for anything, not only just for hockey, but also soccer and any of the activities, recreational activities for children. They really weren't a priority. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, that wasn't the priority of the day. So in 2008, when the government started handing out all of those funds, I wrote an email, and I still have it, to all the members of council asking how come they weren't putting any focus on funding for recreation within the community and the desperate need for a new community center and recreation, et cetera, et cetera. And for those that did respond back, they basically said it's not a priority. That's not one of our priorities at this time. If we recall, their priority was Fraserville, in running the water to Fraserville and the residential development to take place in Fraserville. And I was rather upset by that, recognizing that here we go again, even with all of this money that's being handed out, we're not even going to apply for it. Fenelon Falls, they received all of their funding. They got the new community center shortly thereafter. North Kawartha got their new community center, and they had all of their plans in place. And I always looked up to North Kawartha and their mayor at the time, Jim Whalen. They just knew what they were doing when it came time to apply for the funding. They got a new work yard. They had a new fire hall with a helicopter pad. They had a new school and library, a new community center, and they were just a well-oiled machine that was able to leverage all of those dollars into their community. And then when I look back at our community, I was so disappointed that we only applied for one project throughout that time, and it was the Fraserville water piping project over to for all of the homes, and that was really what got me going. And it was the response back in those emails, which was around 2009, that really invigorated me to actually attend the council meeting. First off, figure out where they were being held, then to start to attend and become engaged, and then to actually put my name in. And ironically, at that time, an individual who I had crossed paths with, Andy Harjula, we attended a meeting down in Cobourg about introduction to council and all of that. And we thought that we had similar concerns with the current council, and we both decided that we were going to run. And unbeknownst to me, he put his name in as Cavan Ward councillor, which was actually my intent. I was going to put in for Cavan Ward councillor because I had no political experience, and I mean none. I'd never attended an all candidates meeting, let alone been the center of attention at the front of an all candidates meeting. So with that position, with him putting his name in for that position, recognizing there really didn't make any sense to run against them, to split votes if we're kind of similar on a lot of the things at the time of where our positions, that's what brought me to run for, at the time, Deputy Reeve for Cavan Monaghan.
So interesting. So, and you were successful the first time, yes?
Yes.
Right,
yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And explain to me the structure of Cavan Monaghan, what is now called Cavan Monaghan. How many of you are there governmental officials elected?
So it's there's the two parts. So you've got your three wards. You've got your Cavan ward, your North Monaghan ward, and your Millbrook ward, and then you've got your deputy mayor and your mayor, and those are all the elected positions based on votes within Cavan Monaghan. And obviously the wards are only elected by representatives of their ward. And then if you're elected deputy or mayor, then you also become part of Peterborough County Council, which takes place in the city of Peterborough at the old courthouse. And at that, there are 8 municipalities in the county of Peterborough, 2 representatives from each. And then during votes, it's a weighted vote based on the amount of funding from each respective municipality. So our current deputy, Matthew Graham, and I each get 1 vote out of 20. So there's 16 representatives, but there's 20 votes. So Selwyn, which pays about 25% of the entire levy of County of Peterborough, get 25% of the vote. So Andy Mitchell, the mayor of Selwyn, gets 3 votes, and Sherry Senis, the deputy mayor for Selwyn, get 2 votes. So they have 5 votes between the two of them. and everybody else, other than Janet Clarkson from Trent Lakes, she gets 2. Everybody else gets 1.
Why does Selwyn? Is it Lakefield and Bridgenorth, or why do
Yeah,
they have so much money?
it's so when they merged together, amalgamated with, they had Smith and Lakefield and Ennismore. There's a lot of, I mean, when you take a look at the assessed value of all the properties around, you got Buckhorn, and you've got Shamong, and you've got all of Ennismore, all of Lakefield, all of Bridgenorth, as you indicated. There's a lot of assessed value, and it works out to them paying to the county 25% of the levy.
Wow, I had no idea. So just out of ignorance, so if on an election voting day, if my postal code is Millbrook, I come in and I vote for somebody in Millbrook, and then deputy reeve or mayor and deputy mayor and mayor, I get 3 votes. Is that what I would do?
Correct, but unfortunately, it's not as simple as your postal code or your address, which is part of the confusing part. It's politically, there's a ward boundary that's put around Millbrook. So, for example, when I lived on the 4th line, Zion Line, we were RR1 Millbrook, LOA1 1GO, but we were in the Cavan ward. So it's very confusing, and we see that when we're out campaigning, because you'll be in the Cavan ward and you'll see somebody with a Millbrook sign up because they really aren't sure, because they say, well, my address says Millbrook, but the Millbrook ward is really the Millbrook proper, and that's going to have to be adjusted as well, because the new subdivision is technically in Cavan, even though we associate it with Millbrook. So its ward boundaries are going to have to be adjusted, and it's another one of the topics it was raised last term of council. How much longer do we want to stay with the ward representation versus at large representation? Because the numbers are very out of whack. So as a simple example, in the last election, the North Monaghan ward was acclaimed, but in the last election that the North Monaghan ward was, Tim Belch was elected, I believe he had maybe 200 votes, and that's how he got elected, and that was more than his opposition. But yet in the Cavan ward, in the most recent election with Kathy Moore, like, it's almost close to 1,000. So the number of people, never mind the assessed value, is very lopsided. Kathy gets 1 vote, as does Tim. And I'm not suggesting we want to get into weighted voting amongst the councillors, because it would just become a clerk's nightmare. But we really do have to take a look at, is that the most appropriate means for representation, is in that ward structure? And there's arguments to be had both ways. North Monaghan, they always feel that they're part of the city and they're left out in Cavan Monaghan, so we don't want to disenfranchise them. But at the same time, with the few residents that are over there, is that really fair that their vote weighs so heavily compared to that, for example, of Cavan?
Yeah. So would you redraw boundaries? Like, if you're going to like North Monaghan, you'd grab some of Cavan into North Monaghan. I'm probably going to send people right over the edge here. Don't email Scott and yell at him. I'm just asking questions.
No, these are wonderful questions, Kim, because it is always a question. So last term of council, they brought forward several different suggested ways to re-subdivide it, but it's just, even that's confusing, because those that have been here their entire lives, they know what North Monaghan is, they know what Cavan is, and they know what Millbrook is. And you start subdividing those, and then people are going to be completely lost when it comes to voting. I think, if anything, the move would be more to just do a ward system where everybody, if you run for a ward councillor, everybody be put in the same pot, and the top 3 elected officials would become your representation. And that being said, I mean, there's pros and cons against all of those different venues. Last term, we just decided to leave it. But if it's the top 3 amongst all of the municipality for your ward councillors, then you run into North Monaghan feeling, well, we may not be well represented because we have one person running, but nobody in Millbrook or Cavan know that individual, for example. So it comes with its downfalls too. It's again, like most council decisions, there's a lot of information to go through, and they're not easy. They're not easy.
What's what I wanted to ask you, I have so many questions for you, but I only have an hour. So I want to ask you about running an election in a small town. You can talk maybe about the first time you did it, or what is required to get elected, and how do you run an election in Cavan Monaghan?
Yeah, it was it's quite an experience. It's got its highs and it's got its lows, that's for sure. One of the highs is if you make the commitment. I've always believed, if you make the commitment to run, that you really need to get out and meet those people. And each successive election, I've done 3 now, with the existing duties of your role at the same time as running for an election, it is very difficult to get out to all the homes. The very first time I ran, I didn't have that I didn't have a current position to also satisfy. So I did. I got out to every single home in 2010. I loved meeting the people. I loved venturing down those long driveways that you've never had the opportunity to venture down to see what was at the other side. I really, really enjoyed that. I enjoyed meeting the people. So the first election, I definitely got to every single house to talk to them. In this day and age, you really need to have a website and a social media presence and be out there so people can understand your platform and feel that they know you, at least through the online portal. They have an opportunity to reach out through social media or email. But then, as I said, as it continues on, my last election, I certainly made that endeavor to get out to every single home. I know I didn't. It just time ran out and I couldn't get out to them all. But I tried to evolve that more to an open town hall type format. The picture below you that you see on that dock, that's actually where I held my town hall meetings, and I held them every single day in the month of September to provide any member of the community an opportunity to come out and sit and talk and ask questions, to try and to open it up, recognizing I was not going to be able to get around to all the homes this time.
Right. And okay, so what is the job of the mayor in our township? What is your week like? Let's take COVID away for a second, because I'm sure it's quite a bit different now. But what's a week or a couple of weeks look like for you, and what is the job of the mayor?
It's interesting because people often ask, like, how much time is required to, and if you want to get into politics, how much time is required? And ultimately, unlike your regular 9-to-5 job, it really comes down to what you as an individual want to put back into your community. If I did the bare minimums, I've got 2 meetings a month at the township level. I've got 2 meetings a month at the county level. So there's 4 meetings. If you sit on any committees, et cetera, those are additional meetings. And then you have to prepare for those. So for example, I believe my next township council meeting, which is Monday, I think the agenda is 300-400 pages. That's normal. And then because I've got a county council next week on Wednesday, that agenda will also be another couple hundred pages to go through. So that's all the pre-reading. They expect you to get the pre-reading done ahead of time. So if you've got specific questions ahead of time that you can ask the staff so that they can be prepared to answer your question. If you just show up at your meeting and just start asking questions and they're unprepared, quite often reports can get deferred, which pushes them off another couple of weeks. So that at a bare minimum is what is required. Over and above that, I really do enjoy getting out and talking with people, talking with businesses to understand what their concerns are, their issues. Trying to stay on the forefront of things that are happening, say, for example, around you. And not to get into the COVID thing, but recognizing that our businesses are struggling and what can we do as a municipality to assist or help. And a lot of times you're heading down paths that maybe as a municipality you've never gone down before, but I feel it's always worth the discussion, because that's the only way you're going to flush things out and see what's going to work or see what's not going to work. But we always want to try to get that message out there. We're here to serve you, the public, the citizens, and the businesses. We don't want to be a hindrance to your business or your daily lives. We want to be there to assist you. So sometimes there is uncomfortable conversations. I know the most recent one has to do with the downtown and closing the street, or we had previous discussions on a one-way street. And you know what? It brings a lot of people out. It makes for a great discussion. And that's what it's intended to do. It's we're always here to assist and come up with those ideas and assist, or we're here to listen if others bring ideas to us. But as you can tell, especially in today's day and age with social media, oddly enough, some people don't appreciate the opportunity to partake in those discussions, and it's amazing how things can sort of get twisted around of to a negative, even though it's not meant to be.
Are you the boss of the CAO of the township? Like, is that the job of the elected officials, or how do you work with Yvette and the CAO?
That's interesting because most people's perception is as the mayor, I just go in there and I just run the whole show and I direct staff to do this and that. And that truly isn't the role of the mayor. We only, as a council, we only have one employee, and that's Yvette, the CAO. So that is our only staff member. All the other staff report to Yvette, and we can only provide them direction as staff members as a council. Through the CIO. That's how ultimately it works. So when somebody calls and complains, I got a pothole in front of my house, I know they expect that it's just, I'm going to call Public Works and I'm going to order them to go out and fix that pothole and then it's all done. Really how it works is that complaint goes in, I'll send it into the Yvette, and depending on the issue, I will copy the staff member to give them a heads up, but ultimately the staff will take their direction from Yvette, the CIO, to go and do that pothole. Now that's an extreme example, and it comes down to a lot of respect amongst everybody and your staff within it. We have an absolutely incredible staff. It's been demonstrated very clearly throughout this whole pandemic how we're all pulling together. But I saw the question pop up, so I'll answer it. The CAO is the Chief Administrative Officer.
It's Bob Kincaid, who's a donor at Fourth Line, and I was like, as soon as I said it, I was like, we got to do the glossary term.
No worries, here. I love that. Thank you, Bob, and good morning. The CAO, so Chief Administrative Officer. So it's kind of confusing because on the Municipal Act, me as the mayor, I'm technically the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer, which everybody understands in a business, but it doesn't operate the same in a municipality. For all intents and purposes, the operational day-to-day is done by the CAO, Chief Administrative Officer, and she essentially takes her direction from a board of directors, which is your council. That's the most simplistic means of which to explain it. Yeah.
So, okay. So you get elected, and I want to ask you a bit about your ethos or the thinking you have in terms of what you see as the priorities for Cavan Monaghan. But do you almost, because you hear this a lot in the media, that as soon as you get elected, I mean, you have to start doing the business of being the mayor, but do you immediately also have to think about getting reelected then in 3 years, or is that not the same in a smaller area?
It's interesting because you sort of learn as you go along. I never really looked at politics as a career. It never hit my timeline to begin with, and I always said I'd get in and do and accomplish what I was set out to do, and then I would exit back out and go about my private life and do my private entrepreneurship. That's been my passion. So it's interesting. You can almost feel that switch in gears almost probably about year 3, definitely in year 4, where things become unnecessarily very political. And it's because people are starting to posture on what they're going to stand for and who they're going to run against, and even internally within a council. And it can cause a lot of tension within a council if you've got individuals that are lining up to run against one another. Suddenly simple topics become very complex because now you're debating for reasons outside of the topic. So that final year especially is very difficult if you've got individuals within a council that are going to be running against one another. It's unfortunate. That's just the way it works. Myself, this is my final term. I haven't hidden it. I've said that since the beginning of the term. I got in on a platform for change, and I wanted to have that community center completed. I wanted to recognize our youth within our community and bring recreation and do a focus on jobs and the economy. And I've done what I said I was going to do. So from myself, there will be no posturing throughout the term of council, I can assure you. I plan on enjoying this whole final term of council and working for the citizens in the business. But no, I won't have to do that. I can guarantee this term of council, everything's coming from the heart. I'll be working my hardest every single day, and any decisions that I make certainly isn't for a re-election bid or anything come next term.
So at this level, there is no, a socialist, liberal, conservative. You guys don't run along or in party. There's no party lines. But what is your ethos for government? I mean, you're 9 years into this whole thing. What is your bent? What is your philosophy as mayor?
I've always been very much pro-business to do whatever we can to try and reduce red tape and bureaucracy, to get jobs going, bring jobs to the community, get people employed. It's the barriers, and it's a frustration every day. You're asking about sort of one of my jobs. I've spent this week for the most part going through legislation and documents specific to projects within our community that are being held up as a result, in my opinion, of red tape and bureaucracy, and how best that we can get around that. So that's been a big focus. It really upsets me when I hear about individuals, whether someone's building a home and they're getting tied up in the process, or they're trying to do a simple addition or something on their property and they're getting held up in the bureaucracy, and they're venturing down a path that they've never been down before, and the expectation that they're going to know how to do all of this. It's not fair. So I try my best to work alongside them to assist and understand their problems. Same thing with the businesses, which has only been highlighted by this whole COVID-19. I can't stress enough that any business that is within our township, that if any of the struggles or what that they're facing now to get back and get going, if there is something that the municipality can do, I would highly encourage, reach out to me. Let me know what it is that we can do to offer to help you get going. You'd be amazed at what some of the requests are. Very, very simple, whether it's the PPE equipment, whether it's social distance, even just sometimes it's understanding the legislation. We've got staff, our fire chief and Yvette, that's the first thing they do every morning. They get up and they get to the office and they're going through all of what has changed in the last 24 hours and how do we adapt and what do we need to do. And as a business that's struggling to begin with, to try and stay on top of that legislation, it can be overwhelming. So once again, I can't encourage them enough. Reach out. Let us know how we can assist you. We're here.
What? I guess this is okay. So here's the question. So we're not going to get into the ORV thing, but this whole ORV thing that's been going on since last June, it seems like, I've been thinking a lot about it. There's like 50-50 on two sides of something. So whatever decision you are going to make on an issue that is split that clearly, and I bet you there's a lot of them like that, where 50% are going to be really happy and 50% of the township are going to be really ticked. How do you guys make decisions?
Yeah, it's very difficult. And that one, it's people are very passionate about it. And I know that it does come across as like a 50-50 and going between those two groups. Ironically, what I find though is, although this is a perfect example of one of the more contentious issues for certain, at the end of the day, it might be 50-50 amongst those that actually care about it. But ironically, there's probably the actual original 50% of the township, which have nothing to do with the topic and aren't engaged at all. And that's not to take away from the 50-50%, in other words, 25-25, that are really engaged about it. But there's a lot of people that, for their own reasons, lead busy lives. They really aren't engaged in a lot of that. But those topics, they're very difficult. There's no winning for a council on a decision such as that. We literally have to go through all of the information and process it. And we get it. We hear from residents all the time on both sides of it. But that one for now, it's just parked. I know you don't want to go into it, but the issue is just parked because literally the simple thing is the one trail that's even being discussed, we have not got an answer back from the city of Kawartha Lakes. They've indicated they won't be sending back an answer to whether or not they'd share a boundary road because they're not meeting to have the discussion. And the MTO haven't given permission to go over the 115. So the whole issue is dead at this point. It's just parked.
But I no, and I was only asking it as the example. Maybe there's a better example, but it's interesting to me that and I would suspect a lot of the time you have to make those hard decisions. I wouldn't want your job for all the tea in anywhere. So how do you do it? Like, how do you make a decision where people are going to start calling you at home at 4:00 and screaming at you because you made a decision they hate?
Yeah, I try and go through all of the information. A lot of times, whether it's coming down to numbers or past reports or past research that's been done on a topic, a couple come to mind. Obviously, the one-way and the closure of the main street was a topic. It was put out there for discussion. Quite frankly, I was looking to the BIA. That's it. I know residents have a particular feel on it, and you got to understand the needs and concerns of the agricultural community with their vehicles and shoppers, etc. But ultimately, that was addressed specifically for the businesses of downtown. If we can assist them in any way, and closing it was to their benefit, then wonderful. We are here to support you. However, if the businesses get back to us and say we don't want it, then I won't support it. It was done for the businesses, and that's why the proposition was brought forward. So that one is a simple example. Another one has to do with we always get people who are on gravel roads that want them hard topped, or hard top that want asphalt, or the upgrades in the roads. And I recognize and can appreciate that people bring forward petitions on why their road should be hard topped, or et cetera, et cetera. I don't put a lot of weight in the petitions because anybody on the road is going to sign the petition. I put it more into the science of what determinations do we use in order to establish whether a road should be hard topped or gravel or asphalt. And that comes down to a lot of times to the traffic studies. Is if it reaches a certain threshold, then it needs to be a certain quality road. And that's pretty much how it is, because if you fall outside of that and you literally just simply respond to petitions, then there's no need for doing 5-year road plans or any of that, because you're just going to respond to citizens, say, I want my road done, you go and do it, and there's no sort of science behind it. So in that sense, it's tough decisions, because you end up in the case where it doesn't qualify for all of those reasons. You do get a lot of nasty phone calls and emails about why they pay their taxes and they deserve a hard top road too, and they don't like your answer. But at the end of the day, you can't simply just respond to those that yell the loudest. It sets a bad precedent, and that's not how I've ever governed. And so, yeah, I do take a lot of flack from particular individuals when they don't get their way. But you know what? It's difficult in small group of friends to agree. So imagine having 9,000 close friends and you're trying to make them all happy. It's never going to work. And if you get into politics thinking you're going to make everybody happy, it's not going to happen.
Were you surprised the first time someone called your home and screamed at you?
No. I was sure. I knew it was coming. I knew for sure it was coming, because I was sort of introduced to that during the whole "It's About Water" campaign in 2010, and seeing that, and so another reason why you need to get out and go door to door is because your first experience with someone who's not going to support your position is going to be at a door. It'll be a slam door in your face, or it'll be the odd curse word that's thrown at you, and you have to have broad enough shoulders and thick enough skin to accept that. And recognize that everybody is not going to support you. I was amazed. I found it discouraging. That was one of my more discouraging points. Was in 2014 when I ran for the second time. Going to households that that you'd done a lot of work for in the previous 4 years, that you championed their cause, you'd worked for them, and you'd really gone above and beyond. And when you go to their place of residence to find an opposition sign on their lawn, or them not supporting you, those ones hurt, because you give it all, you do for all of the residents, etc. But at the end of the day, you remember the ones that you really went above and beyond for and put all the time and effort into. So yeah, those would hurt more than the nasty phone calls. It becomes part of the process.
I'm going to ask you two questions here. So the second one's going to be what you're proudest of, and I think I know the answer. But so let's we'll put a pin in that one. But can you think back since 2010? Is there a decision you made that you think you got wrong, or you wish you'd gone a different way with it? And you don't have to answer, like, I'm not answering that.
Oh no, I'm trying to think. If you'd give me a heads up on this one, I could have put more thought. Off the top of my head, I'm trying to think. I for sure there would have been. All my decisions, hindsight, I've had. There's times when you think, oh, I wish I'd changed. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to give an example.
Okay, we'll come back to it if it occurs to you. But tell me, I'm okay. I'm going to guess. I'm going to write it on my hand. What is you're most proud of in your 9 years?
It definitely was the ability to bring forward that community center. It was
2019 must have been pretty sweet, right?
It was very sweet, yeah, and it was nice. The first step into recognizing the importance of recreation within the community, especially for the youth, was obviously Maple Leaf Park and the upgrades that took place there. We've got a fantastic group over there that runs recreational soccer for our youth, so that was sort of the first one. And then, yeah, by all means, it was that second one. It's a true community center. I absolutely, when it was open and when it reopens, I'm there almost every day. I just take in our community members' ability to use the facility, the walking track, especially in the cold months. This past winter when it was open, the number of seniors that are up there walking around, taking advantage of that walking track and utilizing it is just, it warms my heart every time I see it. That will definitely stand as being my proudest moment, to be able to bring that through. It was only done with the support of council. So praise definitely goes out to that group of councillors that had to make that tough decision to move ahead. That was Councillor Ryan Huntley, Councillor Tim Belch, Deputy Mayor John Follis, and Councillor Jordan Landry. It truly is a result of all of council. It's very easy for councillors to just talk about a topic and request more studies and keep moving on. You take a look at some of the surrounding municipalities that have not moved forward with such large endeavors, and it continues to be talked about and the price continues to go up. At some point, you need to bite the bullet and move ahead with it. Our pricing, we wanted to keep it at 15 million when everything came in. It was right at the time when Trump was in and he did the tariffs on steel and all of that. And unfortunately, the prices all went up as a result. So we had a tough decision at that time to make, to basically bite another $2 million overage in order to move ahead. And that was the pivotal vote to move ahead in Cavan Monaghan with that new community center. If we hadn't done it then, we'd still be having that discussion now. So I am so proud. It's not just me, it was that entire council, but that's definitely one of my proudest moments for sure, as far as council and demonstrating how we can move ahead productively within our community. And it'll be a lasting legacy for a long time for our entire community to use.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, it's pretty beautiful. I can't wait. Can it open yet? Can parts of it open yet?
I don't believe so. The indoor recreation is still, I think, held up in this phase. But yeah, the first opportunity we have to get it back opened up, we will. I know there's all kinds of ball hockey and leagues and stuff that are anxious to get back into the facility. I don't expect the walking track to be as popular during the summertime because people have the ability to walk outside and enjoy our beautiful rolling hills of Cavan Monaghan. But no, once that weather turns and it gets a little colder or slippery or icy, you can expect that the seniors are going to start coming back in, especially. And they get the opportunity to watch the youth that are playing hockey a lot of times that are on the ice. It's great to see. Our next step, and I really hope we're able to get there this term of council, is we want to put, whether it's condos or whether it's apartments or rent geared to income, similar to the Millbrook Manor, right beside it to the west of that community center. I really would like to see that brought to completion. I'd really want to get that ball rolling and everything going this term of council. It's something that's really important. So many of our seniors that have been born and raised within our community are forced to leave the community to finish their end of life. My grandmother was a perfect example. She was born and raised within the municipality, and when she got into those later years, was forced to leave and go to Peterborough first, and then off to Lakefield in her final days. And that's something that will always not sit well with me. I wish there was the opportunity for space here within our township. They deserve the opportunity to spend the rest of their lives here, and those opportunities right now aren't available. And that it will be a big focus of my final 2.5 years, is to get that ball rolling and get things happening. I was just involved in a meeting yesterday with regards to that specific topic.
I want to ask, so the Highlands is opened. It's close to almost all the houses being built in the first phase. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I think they might, give or take, I think they might have 25 lots, I think, remaining that have not been sold or built on at this point. But it's pretty much maxed out at this point.
And what are there plans for more phases of this, or is this it with that kind of new home development?
Yeah, so that was phase one. Phase two in our official plan was north of Fallis, so surrounding the township office and surrounding hopefully the new apartments, condos, rent geared to income. So it would almost make the letter C around the township office. So that phase, the completed subdivision application, was received by the county in November of 2018, just shortly after the election. And so that's one. And then there's another proposal for just to the west of the current 345 homes. There was a smaller proposal there for some of the lands that was there. And then across the road on the lands that we refer to as the Conrad property, the hill as you're heading down, that is designated for commercial retail, all in there. And then behind it, technically, there's more residential homes there that would link down almost to the back end of what we refer to as the Veltri subdivision. So there's a few homes, 30 going at the bottom of that. And then the plan is at some point potentially to link that Veltri subdivision up to the top, so that you'd have two ways in and out of that Nina Court and subdivision down there.
How do you balance, because I think some of us, and there's these subdivisions and development are so contentious there, they can be. How do you balance feeding communities locally with farmland with the development you need for progress? Like, where's the balance there?
It's so difficult, and it's a wonderful topic. Back when we did our official plan, the decision was made to no longer grant severances, which was a very tough topic because myself, with my ancestors having been from the area, my grandfather had a farm on the fourth line. It was that first farm, and he had 3 daughters, none of which were interested in farming. And in 1971-72, he began to go blind and was forced to give up the farm. And his way out, his retirement plan, because farmers don't have the pensions and everything else that all the private sector do, his out clause was the fact that he was able to sever a couple lots so that he could build his home and retire to it. and that's one of the severed lots was where we built as well. And that is, it's one of the opportunities for a farmer to recognize that value. So, but the flip side of it is then you're using up valuable land for 1 acre lots spread amongst the agricultural lands, which are supposed to be used for feeding your citizens, etc. And so that became the balance. So in their last official plan, there was no more severances granted, and the focus of all the growth was going to be on municipal services with smaller lots to increase the density so that you can provide for the growth that the province has allocated to the township, but use as minimal amount of land as possible. So for all intents and purposes, where the Highlands is and where the next phase is very high dense homes, which really is not what we're used to in this area. And the alternative would have been that we don't do any focus on municipally serviced properties, and we just have 1 acre severances all over. So if you can imagine the 345 homes, rather than putting them in that one field, if we just left the severances the way they were and everybody applied for severances, and you had 345 more severances throughout the township, and then the next phase is another 800, then you have 800 more severances. You can see how that, although it's spreading it all out around the municipality and it doesn't feel as dense, you're also using valuable farmland as you continue to give out more severances. So that was a very contentious issue that hit close to home for me, given my personal circumstances with regards to, I grew up on a severance and I absolutely loved my proximity to farmland and nature around me. And it's in stark contrast to the lot sizes that are in the Highlands. And when the province hands down those numbers, they wanted municipalities to start moving towards the serviced lands. And we were under a lot of pressure with regards, if you recall, for the annexation discussions with the city of Peterborough and North Monaghan specifically. Our MPP was not in power. The city of Peterborough was in power. He was in cabinet. And there was a lot of talk that we could just end up losing North Monaghan in its entirety if we didn't properly plan for the growth that we were being allocated. So that was sort of always behind the scenes. We had to ensure that we were planning for the amount of growth, and as contentious as it was, and that's one of those topics that you get the late night phone calls and nasty emails about not wanting growth, but it wasn't easy.
Yeah, I bet. I'm so curious if now with COVID and the density in the GTA being an issue around spread, whether we'll find more people looking to relocate places like ours. And I also wonder if there was no food insecurity in March, there was no supply chain issues, but I know that it's made people start to think about buying local food more. And I'm hearing that more. Are you hearing any of that?
Yeah, and we've got the new market that they've just set up at the that they're running, where you purchase your stuff online, then you show up and you get your food, and it's a local initiative. It's wonderful. I think people are becoming more aware of buying local and the importance thereof. And it's great to see. That's one of those advantages of the social media. People are becoming more and more connected, and you're able to switch direction very, very quickly. And a simple example was last year when there was horrible rainstorm, and literally in a matter of days, we were able to move the market from the Old Millbrook School to the inside of the arena, so to enable our local producers to continue to sell their produce. And that wouldn't happen 10, 15 years ago when you didn't have that social media, because if you had to wait for the next newspaper article to come out and who would read it and etc. But social media, it just continues to grow every day with getting that message out, and it's certainly a very important strategy. But yeah.
It's so amazing to watch you on some of the Millbrook Facebook sites, how quickly you react to people, because people they sure say what they think on there, or what they think. But yeah, you're right on them, dispelling myth or providing information.
It is. It's one of those things when you talk about, like, what's your commitment to as mayor, what's your role, and that's one of those topics where it's not something that you need to do. I mean, I could just ignore it and just let it exist, and it can essentially be just internal rants within citizens and just leave it at that. I personally feel it as part of my engagement. I do enjoy it, to try and get the right and the correct information across. I'm sure there's a lot of people that appreciate my responses, and I'm sure there's others that don't appreciate them at all. But I always try and be truthful and lay out the facts. And at the end of the day, I really enjoy and appreciate engaged citizens. It does lead to the nasty phone calls and the nasty emails at times, but at the same time, it also leads to the nice phone calls and the nice emails as well. So that's one of those things. That's a 7/24 job. I try to ensure, especially on something that's really not factual and off the wall, I try to get to it as soon as I can, just to dispel it so that it doesn't continue, because it's amazing in this day and age. It's once people read something, then it must be true, and then off it goes if you don't quickly squash it.
Right. I want to see if Lindy has some questions, and then we'll do a wrap up because I have to let you go by 9 o'clock. But Lindy, are you there? And are there any questions in the Q&A? Because I have lots more for Scott. Or not.
I am here. And yes, we do have a few questions.
Okay.
Some of the questions that came in have already been addressed. So I just want to mention that for anyone who submitted them. If you missed a section of the chat, to watch it again on YouTube, because some of those questions have been addressed. But we have a couple here. So Scott, what is your favorite part of your job?
Engaging with citizens. I really do enjoy it. I really appreciate the phone calls when people, after you work hard on a particular issue, the thank yous, and I find that very rewarding. It's nice to know that when you get up in the day and you get an email and you can bring satisfaction to somebody or bring resolve to an issue, I find that very rewarding. I do really enjoy it. I recognize that I can't always please everyone, but I do try my absolute best to bring resolve to issues, and that's the most rewarding.
Awesome. And then a bit of a more specific question here from Noel. He asks, is it possible to use the jail lands to help reduce the commercial congestion downtown?
Yeah, the jail lands have been a source of conflict for quite some time, just in that the province has just literally, they own it for starters, but they have not made a decision to move forward for any sort of, for us to acquire them or for anyone to acquire them. So there they sit, and it's very valuable land. And I don't mean that in the sense of dollars and a monetary value. They're very valuable lands in that they provide such an opportunity right now for residents to be able to walk them and enjoy them. And there's beautiful rolling hills, and it seems like you can see forever. You can see right over the entire village of Millbrook. So I know those that are out there that are enjoying them appreciate it. But at this point in time, it was even considered as a possible location for the community center. That was one of the options we looked at back in 2013. Before we had the legal weed, I should say, they had the opportunity. I brought forward an opportunity to do medicinal marijuana growing at that facility, and all of the benefits that would have went with it in collaboration with Trent University and the DNA cluster. But the province wasn't interested at that time, and it was a little early. It was prior to the legal weed, but I was surprised, enlightened, and appreciated that our community was very supportive of that initiative. It would have been fantastic if that had gone through, especially in light of the world that we live in now. The opportunity, the number of jobs that we could have brought into this community would have been phenomenal. But unfortunately, that land sort of, it's sitting there. It's got the pause button on it, and at this stage, there's nothing really the municipality can do. We just sit and await a decision by the province before we can do anything.
Do you have a recommendation into them, or have you asked to buy the land, or?
So the way it works is there's a pecking order of who they have to go through before it can actually be released to the public for private ownership. We put our name on that list to be notified ASAP as soon as the lands become available. So they're aware of our interest, and that's essentially where it's sat. But that is where it's sat for my entire 10 years of being on council. That's where it's sat. So they are well aware. We've reissued the same letter over and over just to make sure it doesn't fall off. So they're aware. But yeah, that's where it sits.
Great. Do you have another question, Lindy?
I do. Just one last question for Scott. I have, you mentioned that this is your final term as mayor. What are your future plans?
That's what I was going to ask as my final question, but thank you.
Oh, there you go. Well, great question. I don't have specific plans at this point. I suspect I'll get back into the private sector. I've enjoyed the private sector. Not to say I haven't enjoyed the public sector, but to be quite frank, I take the mayor position as a full-time job. It's up to the individual to what you make that position. It is a full-time job. That's my expectation of myself in that role. And having said that, I've done what I said I would accomplish. I will go back to the private sector at the end of this term of council. Open to offers in 2.5 years. I have nothing planned at this point. I have done my own business, small business, which I sold during my last term of council. So I'm open to all opportunities once this stint as mayor ends. I don't foresee any further political aspirations down the road. I've enjoyed it. I've loved my community and serving my community. I hope people can look back and reflect on the last 10 years and how far we have come and all of the positives that have been put around them. And I certainly don't leave with any regrets. I've done everything I said I would do, and I will move on.
That's great. So my follow-up was just to sort of poke a stick at it and say, no interest in going provincial or federal, like dipping your toe in those arenas?
No, no, it's not necessarily to say that I'm pleased necessarily with the provincial or federal, but I don't have that same burning desire to get involved and make a difference at those levels as I did locally. I mean, I guess you can never say never, but I'm certainly not trying to strategically position myself for run and provincially or federally. That it's not my intent. I believe I'll end up back in the private sector in 2.5 years.
Okay. Is there anything I missed? Anything else you want to say or clarify before I let you go? I have like 1 minute left.
Oh, sure. Some questions came in, and when the questions are very short, I can see them. If the questions are longer, in other words, they're introducing themselves in something, I only get about the first 10 words. So I couldn't respond to any of those questions. So just for your future ones, if you want the individual to respond to a question, make it short, like 6 words or less. I can see it, I'll respond to it, incorporate it into my answer or your next speaker. If you put a long thing, I can't see it and I can't really be moving around to get to it. So that's yeah. So I tried to respond to anything that was short. Any of the long ones I left for you both to ask me at the end. Is
this in the Q&A? What are we talking about here? Sorry.
I see stuff popping up on my screen. That's how I was able to answer the question about the CAO. So I saw it so I could respond, but I think it sounds like there was other ones that I didn't see because I know they went off my screen, so I couldn't read them to respond as I was going through.
I think what we're talking about, so these were just in the chat window, but Libby has another Q&A window that people have been submitting questions to that you and I can't see.
Oh, okay. However, that CAO one came in, that was perfect. I could answer.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you to Robert Kincaid. Thank you so much for spending the hour with me. That was awesome. I learned so much, and I'm so grateful of you taking the time.
Oh, thank you so much, Kim. This was such a wonderful idea, and it's great to see you bringing this forward and providing this opportunity for our community. And I do wish you all the best in 2021 when you're able to get back out and doing your theaters. I must say a quick little story, because I grew up on the 4th line. I was that first house on the 4th line. And when you opened up for your first year, we thought for the first week that there was a lot of deaths on our road, and they were going up to the cemetery because the cars were nonstop going up our road. And we weren't aware of the new 4th line theater that had opened. And I think after the first week, we thought something else is going on up our line. And sure enough, it was the 4th line theater. So I'm so glad that it was your business venture and it wasn't just a lot of people in the community passing away, because there was a lot of traffic in those days, because people assume if you want to go to the 4th line theater, you go right to Highway 28 in the 4th line and drive the whole way. So congratulations on doing such a fantastic job in our community. I've always enjoyed getting out to your shows, and keep up the fantastic work, all of you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's kind of, well, this year is really unbelievable, but generally it's unbelievable that almost 3 decades on, it's still going strong, and that we bring so many people to the area, and that we get to tell the stories of such an amazing township and amazing people.
Yeah, wonderful.
Okay, take it easy, and hopefully we'll see you in person at some point in the not too distant future.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in this. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Scott. Have a great day.
You too.
Okay,
bye.
Bye, everyone.